Welcome back. You're watching The Fix with me, Karima Brown. I'm in conversation with the co-director of the Institute for Economic Justice, Neil Coleman. Neil, now you have engaged Parliament, you have made use of the process, you've lobbied them, you've sent them a letter. There is talk that you might actually go a court route. What would be the legal basis on which to challenge Minister Mboweni's supplementary budget?
Well, there are discussions going on currently in civil society, Karima, about the possibility of some type of challenge. Basically, the Constitution provides that the state must use maximum available resources to progressively realize the socio-economic rights which are contained in the Constitution. And what we see in this austerity budget is a regression, a massive cutting of the available resources. And in fact, you're seeing what Treasury is doing is they're robbing Pamela to pay Paul. They're taking away the 400 to 600 billion rand over the next couple of years. And part of that is going to the stimulus package, but it comes from the cuts in education, transport, infrastructure, et cetera, which are going to have devastating impacts on the availability of education, health, transport, et cetera, to the poorest parts of the population. So we think that we've probably exhausted the available routes in relation to the number of approaches we've made to government, to the president, to the minister, and to Parliament, and therefore it is a realistic possibility to investigate the route of a court challenge based on violation of these constitutional obligations.
That is quite a drastic measure, Neil, and the courts, of course, don't like to get involved in policy making. They leave that to lawmakers. Sure. What is going to be the constitutional prescripts on which, over and above the fact that the Constitution speaks broadly about socio-economic rights, but in law, what are you going to put forward as an argument?
I don't want to prejudice civil society's initiative. If it is going to take the initiative, obviously we'll take advice from senior counsel and from people who've been involved in these challenges before. But there are a range of constitutional court decisions on these issues of socio-economic rights which have been handed down, which provide some precedent. But we obviously in, to some extent, an unprecedented situation now, where the economy faces a contraction and where we face sort of real desperate hunger, joblessness, the inability of people to earn livelihoods on a massive scale. And this is a situation which the court has never had to pronounce on before. So, yes, I think let the situation unfold, and we'll certainly come back to you if the civil society organizations decide to go ahead with this, to outline in more detail what would be the basis of the challenge.
Now, some people will argue, Neil, that now is in fact not the time to gear up for a fight, that we should put our heads together. South Africa often buys into the language, the nomenclature of social compacting, that we need to compromise, we need to put ourselves in each other's shoes, and this kind of, oppositional positioning isn't necessarily helpful. What do you say to critics who say that you are trying to almost bring ideology into your argument at a time when we need pragmatic, practical solutions to fix, our economy?
Yeah, Karima, you must understand that if you look at the economist group, for example, the Economist Initiative, it's quite a heterodox and pluralist grouping of professionals, policymakers, academics, et cetera, who don't necessarily share one ideological perspective. So it's not an ideologically driven campaign. I think the Economist Initiative doesn't claim to be representative of civil society and so on. But if you look at the engagements in NEDLAC and in other forums, the trade unions and civil society have been extremely accommodating in trying to confront the reality that we're all in this situation together, and therefore that we have to look at a national response to this crisis. Therefore, when the president announced the 500 billion rand package, a number of commentators, including myself, were very positive in saying that government at least is coming to the table with something bold. We didn't think it was enough, but it was a start. But now that the package has essentially been hollowed out and that we're only seeing less than half of the package materializing, constituencies feel that they're in such a desperate situation, seeing massive job losses, seeing massive hunger in communities, etc. But also, Karima, I think we need to confront the reality that we are now facing a massive second wave of infections, and that the prospect of more lockdowns is a very real one, and that what you've seen governments doing around the world is to embark on second and third waves of rescue packages. But the stance taken by National Treasury clearly indicates that they do not intend at all to embark on any further rescue measures. And therefore that has pushed society into quite a desperate position where they have to push very hard for a shift in this very dogmatic, ideologically driven position that Treasury has taken. And so really, what other alternative is there?
Neil, one of the things that often comes up when criticism is raised with Treasury is the fact that Treasury operates like an island. Many people on the left like saying this and that it's not necessarily carrying out the mandate of the governing party. You seem to be saying something similar this morning, where you're saying that the President's stimulus package has in fact been hollowed out by Treasury. How does it happen that the President, who presides over the entire executive and government, is able to outline a rescue package and Treasury, which is a government department, turns around and, in your view, turns it into something completely different? How does that happen in government? Where, for example, is the President? Where is the governing party? Where are all the ministers that were there? Are you suggesting that Treasury is a law unto themselves?
They are a law unto themselves and have been, unfortunately, Karima, for the last 20-something odd years. I think that the apex of that Treasury arrogance was demonstrated when the then Director General in 1996 told Parliament that the introduction of GEAR, the very conservative macroeconomic program, was non-negotiable. Now, Treasury has the right to advance particular views and to indicate that they think it's prudent to go one direction or another direction. But they cannot substitute themselves for the democratically elected processes. And I think what we saw in Parliament with the anger which Yunus Karim expressed to the Director General was precisely an example of this type of arrogance, where Treasury technocrats tell the policymakers and the decision makers what is possible and what is not possible. What is more worrying is that they use very complex smoke and mirrors. We must remember Treasury has access to huge resources in terms of technical expertise, etc., etc. So what they do is they use very complicated mechanisms to create the impression that X route is the only route that's possible. And therefore, this is the reason why a much more open discussion with a more diverse group of economists, of experts, of advisors becomes very, very important. And we were encouraged when we had engagements with the presidency, and then the president announced the package, because it seemed like the presidency was listening. But Treasury clearly didn't like that package. They didn't like what government was doing, and they've done everything in their power to reverse that. And that is what we're seeing currently.
Neil, final question. Are you going to appeal to the President directly to intervene? And are you going to essentially ask him to rein in Tito Mboweni?
Yeah, the President needs to intervene. Certainly, he needs to rein in the minister. He's not a super minister, and he needs to rein in the Treasury, which seems to be a law unto itself, as you put it. And we hope that the President will that it's not too late for the President to intervene. Of course, it's very difficult now that the budget has been put before Parliament. But as I indicated to you, there are going to be these second and third waves of infections. There's very clearly a need for a new rescue package. So hopefully the President will then Consider that. Consider all the facts on the table and the evidence, the fact that so many people are not being reached by the existing package, and will introduce a further rescue package. We certainly hope that he will do that.
All right, that is where we leave it. Neil Coleman, the co-director of the Institute for Economic Justice, going head-to-head with Finance Minister Tito Mboweni over that supplementary budget, and we might yet still see a constitutional court challenge to that process. It's, of course, a story we will be keeping a keen eye on. Still ahead, Amnesty International calls on Water and Sanitation Minister Lindiwe Sisulu to catch a wake-up on water provision, especially in the crisis-ridden Eastern Cape. Stay with us.